In this chilling tale, follow Charles, a man who finds himself navigating an eerie, silent metropolis that seems to pulse with an unsettling life of its own. Prepare to unravel a mystery filled with creeping dread, where every shadow holds a secret, and the path forward may lead to unimaginable horrors. Will Charles escape the darkness, or will he be consumed by it? Watch now and discover the terrifying truth that lies hidden in the depths of the abyss.
First thing I remember is the silence. The deafening, oppressive silence that followed the explosion. It was the kind of silence that gnawed at your sanity, an unnatural void that swallowed sound and left you with nothing but your own heartbeat, company. The city, once a cacophony of life, now lay still beneath a pall of gray skies. The buildings, skeletal remains of what they once were, stood as silent witnesses to the chaos that had unfolded. My name is Charles, and I used to be a software engineer in Boston. That was before the war, before the world changed. Now, I'm just a man trying to survive in a reality where the lines between what's real and what isn't have become blurred. Been 6 months since the government unleashed the gas. 6 months since everything I knew and loved was torn apart by a weapon they said would bring an end to the conflict. But instead, it brought an end to us. I was in my apartment when it happened. I remember the warning sirens blaring, frantic announcements urging people to take shelter, stay indoors. I'd been glued to the television, watching as reports came in from across the globe about the escalating tensions, and then, just as suddenly, the broadcast stopped. The screen went black and the power cut out. That's when the silence began. First, I thought I had gone deaf, but then I heard the faint sound of something shuffling outside my door. I crept to the peephole, my breath caught in my throat. What I saw on the other side wasn't human. It was a twisted, distorted figure that once might have been a man. Its eyes were wide, unblinking, and filled with a rage that seemed otherworldly. I stumbled back, trying to process what I had seen. That's when I noticed the gas seeping under the door. It was thick, a greenish haze that clung to everything it touched. I held my breath, hoping it wouldn't reach me, but I could already feel it creeping into my lungs, burning its way through my body. I collapsed to the floor, my vision blurring as the world around me started to twist and contort. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the face of that creature, pressed against the peephole, its mouth twisted into a grotesque grin. When I came to, the gas was gone, but the damage had been done. My head throbbed with a pain that felt like it was splitting my skull in two. I forced myself to my feet, every movement sending waves of agony through my body. I stumbled to the window and looked out at the city below. What I saw made my blood run cold. The streets were filled with them. Those creatures, those things. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, their heads snapping from side to side as if searching for something, or someone. I had to get out of there. I had to find out what had happened. But more than anything, I needed to survive. I packed a bag with whatever supplies I could find: food, water, flashlight, and a knife I'd kept in the kitchen drawer for emergencies. I had no idea if it would be enough, but it was all I had. The first few days were a blur of fear and desperation. I moved through the city like a ghost, avoiding the creatures as best I could. I soon realized that they were drawn to noise, so I made sure to keep quiet, slipping through alleys and back streets, always on the lookout for a place to hide. It was during one of these moments of hiding that I met Claire. She was huddled in the back of an abandoned convenience store, clutching a crowbar like it was the only thing keeping her alive. I almost didn't see her in the dim light, but the glint of metal caught my eye. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, neither of us daring to move. Are you one of them?" she finally whispered, her voice trembling. "No," I replied, my own voice sounding foreign to my ears. I'm just trying to survive like you." She lowered the crowbar slightly, but her eyes never left mine. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "You don't," I said, taking a step closer. "But if I were one of them, you wouldn't be asking me that question, would you?" She hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but don't think I won't use this if I have to." We decided to stick together after that. There was safety in numbers, or at least that's what we told ourselves. As the days turned into weeks, we learned to rely on each other, sharing what little we had and keeping watch while the others slept. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us going. But the gas had done more than just change the people outside. It had changed the world itself. Reality seemed to shift and warp around us, making it impossible to tell what was real and what was just a figment of our imagination. We'd see things, shadows moving where there shouldn't be any, buildings that seemed to bend and twist in ways that defied logic. Sometimes we'd hear voices, whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was Claire who first noticed the changes in me. At first, I thought it was just the stress, constant fear and uncertainty taking its toll. But then, one night, as we were huddled together in an old warehouse, she pointed out the scars on my arms. I hadn't even realized they were there. "Charles, what's happening to you?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I looked down at my arms, the jagged lines that crisscrossed my skin. They looked like they'd been carved there, but I had no memory of how or when it had happened. "I don't know," I admitted, fear creeping into my voice. "I don't remember doing this to myself." Claire reached out, her fingers gently tracing the scars. "It's the gas. It's doing something to you, to all of us." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that seemed to be settling over my mind. "No, it's more than that. It's like I'm losing myself, like parts of me are just disappearing." We both knew what that meant. The gas wasn't just changing the people outside. It was changing us too, warping our minds, our bodies, turning us into something else, something not quite human. We had to find a way out, a way to reverse whatever was happening to us. But as the days wore on, it became clear that there was no escaping it. The world had become a labyrinth of shifting realities, each more twisted and terrifying than the last. Then came the night when everything changed. We were hiding in an old subway station, the air thick with the stench of decay. Claire was sitting across from me, her eyes closed, trying to get some rest. I was keeping watch, listening for any signs of movement above us. That's when I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, calling my name. At first, I thought it was just another trick of the gas, another hallucination. But then it came again, louder this time, more insistent. "Charles." I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice was coming from one of the tunnels, echoing off the walls in a way that made it impossible to tell where it was coming from. "Did you hear that?" I asked, turning to Claire. She opened her eyes, frowning. "Hear what?" "The voice, calling my name." Claire looked at me like I was crazy. "There's no voice, Charles. You're imagining things." But I knew what I'd heard. The voice was real, and it was getting closer. I grabbed my flashlight and started down the tunnel, ignoring Claire's protest. I had to find out where it was coming from. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, the darkness swallowing everything but the small circle of light from my flashlight. The voice kept calling my name, pulling me deeper and deeper into the shadows. It was familiar, almost comforting, like a memory I couldn't quite place. And then I saw her. She was standing at the end of the tunnel, her back to me. She was wearing a dress, the same one she'd been wearing the last time I saw her. My heart skipped a beat as I realized who it was. "Emily?" She turned around slowly, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow. It was her, but it wasn't. There was something wrong, something terribly wrong. "Charles?" Her voice was a whisper, barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. I took a step closer, my hands trembling. "Emily, is it really you?" She didn't answer, just stood there staring at me with those empty eyes. I wanted to reach out to her to hold her, but something held me back. Something deep inside me, a voice that told me to run, to get as far away from her as possible. And I couldn't leave her. Not again. I took another step and then another until I was standing right in front of her. She reached out, her hand cold and clammy against my skin. "Come with me, Charles," she whispered. "Come with me, and everything will be all right." I knew I should say no, that I should turn and run, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave her. Not again. I nodded, my mind numb, my body moving on its own. As she led me deeper into the tunnel, the world around me began to fade, the darkness closing in until there was nothing left but the sound of her voice and the feel of her hand in mine. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. I woke up in my apartment, the sunlight streaming through the window. The world outside was as it had always been, the city bustling with life, the sounds of traffic and people filling the air. It was like nothing had ever happened. Like the gas, the creatures, the war was all just a bad dream. But as I looked down at my arms, at the scars that still crisscrossed my skin, I knew the truth. I was still in the tunnel, still lost in the darkness, and Emily was still waiting for me.
Remember that not all discoveries bring enlightenment. Some bring only darkness and despair. If you're ready for another spine-tingling experience, we've selected a video about the creepypasta, Jeff the Killer. It's on your screen now, and remember to subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, but be cautious, because some mysteries are better left unsolved.